So there's a big question pulled straight from our source slides today, and it's a simple one. Is Donald Trump as powerful as he thinks he is?
I mean, that is the defining question of modern politics, isn't it?
It really is. And on this specific Friday, February 20th, 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court actually gave us a definitive answer.
It was a loud no.
A very loud no.
Mhm.
If you've looked at your phone at all this morning, you've seen the breaking news. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to strike down a massive, I mean massive chunk of President Trump's economic agenda.
Specifically, the sweeping global tariffs.
Right. And for this deep dive, we've got a great stack of sources to unpack all of this for you. We are pulling from breaking live reporting from the BBC and The Guardian.
We also have a really fascinating set of political science slides that detail this whole President versus Supreme Court dynamic, plus a look at the current makeup of the bench.
Exactly. So our mission here is to figure out what just happened. Because this isn't just about a trade tax, it is a historic clash between the executive branch and the judicial branch. We're going to unpack why the court ruled this way, who surprisingly voted against the president, and what this actually means for the whole concept of checks and balances.
Because the concept of checks and balances just got a major real-world stress test.
It really did. So let's start with segment one here. The ruling itself and this completely surprise coalition.
The 6-3 decision.
Yeah. The court basically decided that Trump illegally overstepped his executive power. But the twist, the part that has everyone shocked, is the breakdown of those 6 votes.
Right, because if you look at the source slides about the current makeup of the court, we have a conservative supermajority. It's a 6-3 conservative split.
So you would think a 6-3 ruling against a Republican president would mean, well, actually, the math doesn't even work without conservatives crossing the aisle.
It doesn't. The ruling against Trump wasn't just the 3 liberal justices. I mean, yes, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson voted to strike it down.
Which was expected.
Completely expected. But they were joined by 3 conservatives: Chief Justice John Roberts, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett.
And that is the absolute irony here, right? Gorsuch and Barrett were appointed by Trump.
They were.
And they just voted to dismantle his flagship economic policy.
It's incredible. And just to round out the bench, the dissenters who supported Trump's use of power were Justices Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas.
So to understand why 2 of Trump's own appointees voted against him, we have to look at the legal weapon he tried to use.
The International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, or the IEPA.
The IEEPA. Catchy.
Very. So Trump's central argument was that the U.S. trade deficit, combined with issues like international drug trafficking, specifically fentanyl, constituted a literal national emergency.
And because it's an emergency, he argued this 1977 law gave him the power to regulate trade without needing to go through Congress.
Exactly. He wanted to use it as a bypass valve. But the court utterly rejected that. The majority opinion essentially said that the law does not authorize unbounded tariffs.
Unbounded?
Right. They called it unchecked presidential policymaking.
Huh.
Basically, you can't just declare an economic emergency to rewrite the entire tax code.
Which leads perfectly into the second thing we need to talk about, because this whole debate really hinges on one word: tax.
Oh, the oral arguments on this were just fascinating.
They really were. We have the quotes from the oral arguments here, and the core debate was about what a tariff actually is.
Right, because the U.S. Solicitor General, D. John Sauer, had to make a really specific, really difficult argument to defend the president.
And he argued that these weren't actually revenue-raising tariffs, right? He called them regulatory tariffs.
Yes, he stood before the Supreme Court and said that the billions of dollars being collected from these tariffs were just incidental.
Incidental.
That was the word. Incidental.
I mean, if you're a business owner paying a 50% markup on imported goods, I doubt you feel that money is incidental.
And the justices certainly didn't feel that way either. There was a huge clapback from the bench.
Justice Sotomayor in particular, we have her quote here. She was highly skeptical and basically interrupted him to say, you want to say tariffs are not taxes, but that's exactly what they are.
It's hard to argue with that logic.
It really is. And then Chief Justice Roberts jumped in to reinforce the constitutional stakes. He pointed out that imposing taxes is a core power of Congress.
Not the president.
Exactly, not the president. And this connects right back to the starter questions in our soul slides. The Constitution explicitly gives the power of the purse to Congress.
Article 1, Section 8.
Right. So the court ruled that the president simply cannot bypass Congress and seize that power just by slapping the word emergency on the economy.
And that distinction is crucial for understanding what actually got struck down today. Because not all of the tariffs are gone.
This is a really important clarification for you as a listener, especially if you work in an industry affected by trade. We need to distinguish the Liberation Day tariffs from the survivors.
Yes, let's break that down.
So the ones that were struck down today are the Liberation Day tariffs. These were announced back in April.
And those were the massive ones. They applied 10 to 50% levies on goods from almost every country in the world.
Right. Broad, sweeping taxes on everyday imports. Those are gone. But there are tariffs remaining in place.
Yes. The tariffs enacted under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962.
And those are specifically on steel, aluminum, and autos.
Right. And the reason those survive is because they cite national security concerns, not economic emergencies.
Ah. So the court isn't saying the president can never implement any tariffs ever.
Exactly. They are saying he just can't use the IEPA, that 1977 emergency law, to unilaterally rewrite global trade policy.
So what does this mean for the economy right now? Because the impact of these Liberation Day tariffs was huge.
It was massive. Average tariff rates had basically settled around 15% across the board.
And this ruling effectively cuts that in half.
Overnight. But it also introduces a whole new kind of chaos, as the BBC reporting points out.
The refund.
The refunds. Importers have already paid these taxes for months.
Billions of dollars.
Billions. There's a coalition called We Pay the Tariffs that represents over 800 businesses. And today, they are demanding full, fast, and automatic refunds from the government.
Good luck getting a fast and automatic refund from the federal government.
Right. It's going to be an absolute bureaucratic nightmare to untangle.
And I imagine the president is not going to be eager to help speed that process up given his reaction to the news today.
No, the fallout from the White House has been intense.
Let's talk about the reaction, because The Guardian has some great reporting on this. President Trump is absolutely furious.
He released a statement calling the ruling a seismic effect. He said it was the difference between going bankrupt and thriving as a nation.
He also complained bitterly about having to wait forever for the decision to come down.
And there was a really striking moment we reported this morning. When the news actually broke, Trump was at a breakfast with state governors.
And he just abruptly dismissed the reporters in the room.
Just looked at them and said, "You can leave now."
Wow, just a total shutdown. But while the president is furious, the markets and our international allies are having a very different reaction.
A completely opposite reaction.
Wall Street essentially cheered. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ went up immediately after the ruling was announced.
Because markets hate uncertainty.
Right.
The Liberation Day tariffs were a massive source of uncertainty for supply chains and pricing. Striking them down provided instant clarity.
And it wasn't just domestic markets. The UK government released a statement today, too.
Yes, they said they expect their privileged trading position with the U.S. to continue. You can almost hear the sigh of relief from London in that statement.
To really understand why Wall Street is so relieved, we have to look at the economic context provided in our sources.
The broader economic backdrop.
Yeah. The U.S. economy had actually slowed down in the fourth quarter of 2025.
And there were very real fears of inflation spiking again.
Right, because Trump argued these tariffs would fill the Treasury's coffers. But economists were warning that the actual result would just be higher prices passed down to consumers.
So the court striking this down might actually cool off those inflation fears.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together. We've got our political science slide deck, which is practically coming to life today.
It really is the perfect case study.
The big evaluation question on those slides is, to what extent can the Supreme Court effectively constrain the president?
And the verdict today proves that the constraint is actually very high.
Extremely high. Even with a court that he personally helped shape, the parchment barriers of the Constitution, as they say, held up.
They did. As the BBC correspondent noted in their analysis, this is a relatively rare check on executive authority from this specific court.
Right, because they've allowed Trump a lot of leeway on things like immigration policy and broader administration goals in the past.
But they drew a hard line in the sand today.
And that line is seizing congressional taxation power.
You can control the borders, but you cannot take the power of the purse.
That's a great way to put it. So just to recap the big takeaway for you as you're processing all this news today, the Liberation Day tariffs are gone.
Struck down.
Because the Supreme Court decided, 6-3, that the president cannot use a 1977 Emergency Powers Act to usurp Congress's constitutional role in taxation.
It is a massive victory for the separation of powers.
It is. But I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought about where this all goes next. Because politics abhors a vacuum.
Always.
If the president can't use the Emergency Act for widespread trade tariffs, but he can use the national security exception under Section 232 for things like steel, what happens next?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we going to see future administrations, whether Republican or Democrat, trying to rebrand absolutely everything as a national security issue just to bypass Congress?
I mean, it's the obvious loophole, right?
Exactly. Could a future president declare climate change a national security threat to bypass Congress on environmental taxes? Or could they declare the internet a national security threat to unilaterally regulate tech companies?
Once you show the executive branch that national security is the only key that unlocks that level of power, they're going to try to use that key on every single door.
Where does the line get drawn next? It's something to really keep an eye on.
It's going to be the defining legal battle of the next decade.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us as we untacked all this breaking news.
Thanks for having me. It was a fascinating discussion.
Always is. For all of you listening, keep digging into the news and stay curious.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.